Well, college football isn't the only one with a top 4 list. No, we have the final vote on the Pop-Tart Power Rankings, something I'm very interested in.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
One of my favorite snacks growing up. We'll talk about that here in a second. We're going to reveal the top 4, so let's get right on to it. Oh, number 1, the strawberry Pop-Tart. I had a feeling that was going to get the top spot, and I think it's well-deserved, Jay.
Is it? It doesn't move me.
Oh.
It's steady. It's
Brother,
steady.
It is the most reliable Pop-Tart out there, and
Okay.
it's also delicious. What about number 2? Oh, brown sugar. I can't say the word that I want to say to describe it. I hate the brown sugar Pop-Tart.
Well, I'm reaching for the brown sugar more than I'm reaching for the strawberry.
Bro, it doesn't even taste good.
Okay, but there's a couple I'm holding out hope for.
All right, number 3. S'mores.
Okay, this is what I thought should have been one right here. This was always a treat.
It can't be number 1 because you can't eat it that often.
Says who?
Anybody who gets overwhelmed by too sweet of a snack.
Okay. All right.
What about number 4? Raspberry?
I'm taking a raspberry over a strawberry.
I can't recall if I've ever had a raspberry Pop-Tart.
The good thing is about a Pop-Tart is you're never going to be mad you ate a Pop-Tart, right?
Okay, so I'll get to that in a second. I want to get to the first 2 out before we really dig into this. We got blueberry, which I do think blueberry is a great flavor. I also do like cherry a ton.
I'm a big cherry guy too, yeah.
So when I was a kid, my mother used to make us eat the Pop-Tarts without the frosting. Ooh. She was like, it's too much sugar. This is not supposed to be a dessert. This is a snack. And I understand you want a Pop-Tart. You're not getting the sprinkles and you're not getting the frosting on there.
I can't imagine that was even a treat at that point.
It wasn't bad. Pop it in the toaster. That thing was pretty good.
You didn't put any, maybe some jelly on it, homemade jelly or something?
It was just the Pop-Tart.
You turned out great. Maybe you're onto something.
Yeah, I think that's how I'm going to do my son when he arrives in this world. It's going to be a lot of fun here. But this is Red Corner, Blue Corner right here on Stadium. Jake Butt, the Michigan Wolverine, All-American tight end, Mackey Award winner, team captain, all of the accolades, and even a better guy.
Also a team captain, also a national champion, my buddy, my co-host, Joshua Perry.
Yes, and we'd like to welcome you into this show as well. We want you to scan that QR code on the screen so you can submit your content. You can also go to watchstadium.com/submit to send that content in. And also, we want you to follow us on Instagram at @redcorner_Blue Corner. But we do have some college football to talk here, and despite what Jake and the people over there in the Blue Corner want you to think, there are other bowl games that do not involve Michigan. As a matter of fact, we got a lot of other Big Ten teams playing in the postseason. For example, the Ohio State Buckeyes, they have a New Year's Six bowl taking on Mizzou in the Cotton Bowl there.
Yeah.
Interesting note about that game. The line opened up with the Buckeyes favored by almost a touchdown, but it has since crossed 0. Now the Tigers are favored by 1.5 points. What is your biggest question going into this bowl game here?
My biggest question is who's going to play, right? That's the question. That's the overwhelming question for all teams. For Ohio State, it's probably Marvin Harrison Jr. Does he play, right? The good thing for the Buckeyes is I think, they've won a lot of games being led by their defense, right? So I still think they're in position for their defense to hold it down and at least keep this close. And then Ryan Day can do whatever he wants to do. But, the big, we talked about this, JP. This is the most important game maybe in recent history for Missouri, and it's not the case for Ohio State. And the thing is there's a rivalry SEC versus Big Ten anyways.
Right.
Ohio State is up there as the biggest or the second biggest brand in the Big Ten. Missouri has the chance to beat them. They don't care who plays or doesn't.
Right.
That would be the best possible outcome for them to take down the Buckeyes. This game matters to me so far. It matters more to Missouri.
Yeah, and the Missouri coach Eli Drinkwitz came out and said that he expects all of his guys to play in this game. And so I think that they are motivated, to your point, and they want to make a statement to America regardless of who's on the other side for Ohio State. And it's even more than just guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., who probably go into the NFL, and Emeka Egbuka, depending on whether he wants to come back. If he goes, he might sit out of this one. You got guys on the defensive side of the football, Denzel Burke, whose draft stock has absolutely exploded. Does he feel motivated to play in this game? JTT, a guy that we've talked about. But also, the big question that we addressed yesterday, who the hell is playing quarterback for the Buckeyes?
Yeah.
Is it Devin Brown? Is it Lincoln Keenholz? We don't even know who's going to be back there taking snaps. And that is one of the big questions as we start to figure out, who's going to be catching it. Well, who's going to be throwing it?
I mean, that's a huge, huge question, right? And if McCord's the guy that transferred, Devin Brown, maybe he could use this game, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he could use these practices to develop. Let me ask you this, though, JP, because in the world of people sitting out, Marvin Harrison Jr., you've talked about his legacy and his character. To me, it seems like there's a chance he actually plays in this game. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, if there was one star who would genuinely consider it and might even actually do it, it would be Marv, because I think that being at Ohio State has meant a lot to him. And I don't know what you get out of a bowl win against a team like Mizzou, but he also probably feels like there's so much unfinished business when he walks out that door, because he's a guy who didn't beat Michigan. He'd like to go out with an explosive performance. But the reality of the situation from me, and you could probably talk to this about your experiences in bowl games here, but I wanted him to do whatever he feels is best for his career, whatever is best for his legacy, and ultimately whatever is best for his moneymaker, and that's his body here.
You know, in basketball, like, you never want to go out on a miss.
Yeah.
Like, maybe Marv is saying, hey, let's at least end on a high note. And it could be more benefit now that people are picking Mizzou to win.
Right.
To go, that would be an upset by his standards. So
yeah, it's fun to dream about, but I have no expectations. I want him to go out there and make as much money as possible as a pro. But before we get out of here, I do want to show you one person who I know is really excited for Ohio State to pull off a win. That is our director of content here at Stadium, Mark Carmen. He is a Michigan fan, but for some reason there's an Ohio State logo on the back of his chair, and he didn't do anything about it all morning long. I think he's Team Buckeyes now.
wait a second, Mark. Like this. Mark's supposed to be on the Wolverine side.
He's not, clearly.
I think we got to have a conversation with Mark. That hurts. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but you do have some explaining to do. Okay, now we're going to go over to the Peach Bowl, where, to me, this is a really, really exciting
Intriguing
matchup. So you got Penn State versus Ole Miss. We kind of previewed this conversation, like, as the best of the rest. Big Ten, SEC earlier in the year, and both teams really, they've been ranked right next to each other all season long. JP, how about this one? What's your biggest question going into this game?
Yeah, what happens when Ole Miss is on offense and Penn State is on defense? I think that this is truly a game that is strength on strength, weakness on weakness. And I've watched Ole Miss offensively, and we know what Lane Kiffin is as an offensive mind. Their quarterback, Jackson Dart, he's not the best quarterback in America by any stretch of the imagination, but he's also a guy who's got really good movement skill. He's got athleticism. He can run the football, and he's been extremely efficient this year. Completion percentage around 65%. Really good numbers. Hasn't turned the football over through the air a ton either. And so for me, I look at him as a guy who's veteran experience, can lead that offense. I've talked about Quinshawn Judkins, their running back, who was one of the best in the country really all year long. They're going to try to challenge a Penn State defense that hasn't given up a ton. And there will be a question for them about who's going to be playing in that football game. Chop Robinson already came out and said he's not going to play, but we know what the mentality is. We know what they want to be. Different question also, Manny Diaz up for the Duke job.
Right.
What happens there? Does he coach in this game if he takes that job? All of that to say, I'm really excited because I do think that these are two of the best individual units in the country that'll get to battle out for bragging rights in a bowl game.
The interesting thing is I don't think Ole Miss has seen a defense. There really isn't too many defenses that have the identity that Manny Diaz tries to have for the Penn State Nittany Lions, like with some of their exotic blitz looks. I mean, they gave Ohio State everything they could handle. They gave Michigan everything they could handle. That is a talented, schematic defense, so that's going to be interesting. On the flip side, though, Penn State needs this to build some offensive momentum.
I think so.
Right? You talk about playing complementary football. You got 15 practices to develop and implement some new schemes. But, man, when you talk about the best of the rest, both of these teams could really use that momentum going into the offseason to try to get to that next level next year.
Yeah, and I think to your point, man, like Drew Aller going out on a high note this year, I think does a lot for him and his development as a young quarterback. But we got to talk about the Big Ten runner-ups here, and that is the Iowa Hawkeyes. They play in the Citrus Bowl against Tennessee, and with everything that has transpired over the season, I think we all know where the big question is here. Will this be Kirk Ferentz's last game as Iowa's head coach?
Man, you know, I think back to it, and there's been some tears shed in situations that probably didn't call for it. Now, I understand, maybe, you know, you love your son, right? There's a part of it, and your son decides that, you know, they'll be parting ways, the team and Brian. So maybe that's part of it, but there's been some tears, and as I read into it, you know, Kirk and Iowa, that they are, I just associate them together, man. One of the winningest coaches in all of college football history, a phenomenal guy, a phenomenal leader. Those tears to me may indicate this may be his last game.
Yeah, I mean, he's been emotional before, but the amount of emotion he's shown this year, I think, is the thing that stands out to me. And I agree with you. I think that for him, to support his son in this way, knowing that his career, and Kirk's career, is going to be coming to an end anyway, I think this timing would make sense. I also think if he's really disappointed about them firing his son, this would be a pretty good get back, because if he just waits until after the bowl game before he says that he's going to retire, now all of a sudden Iowa is like after the hiring cycle trying to figure out who their coach is going to be. We've talked about a couple of candidates that could be up for that, and Phil Parker and Varwood's special teams coach over there too, and I think both those guys would be a fit. But the idea that Kirk would be out does not shock me whatsoever.
And maybe they're hiring from within, like you said. One of those names, Phil Parker, well, some breaking news came out for him yesterday as it goes to the Broyles Award winner, which goes to the nation's top assistant coach. And that went to Phil Parker, but another name was Sharon Moore, Michigan's offensive coordinator, thought he may win that. So, of course, Phil Parker wins it, and that did not sit too well with a lot of the Michigan fans from the blue corner. And we're scrolling through some of the message board posts here. JP, what do you think? Do Michigan fans have a real gripe?
We got this one from MGO Blog that said they were never going to give it to Sharon because of the cheating that went on. And
that's a big brand for Michigan too, MGO Blog.
Should easily have won, and all the other things is anti-Michigan. I will say that I do think that there were some people who were voting on that award that says that we're not going to punish Sharon because of the cheating, but we're also not going to reward him by evaluating what he did as a head coach. Because the reason he did that is because, so we'll just evaluate literally what he did as an assistant, which he did a great job. But let me get you some numbers here, though.
Please.
Iowa offensively, 130 in scoring, 133 in total offense. Their defense, they had 3 safeties this year. They had a pick 6 and a fumble return, right? So the reason they're winning football games is because of what they can do with their defense. Let's look at what happened in the head-to-head battle that we saw in Indianapolis. So Michigan typically averages over 6 yards a play. Iowa held them to 3.3 a play. That was a season worst. Michigan averages 9 yards an attempt. Passing, Iowa held them to 4.9 yards per attempt. That was a season worst. Michigan averages 4.2 yards per carry. Rushing, Iowa held them to 1.9 yards per attempt rushing, season worst. Michigan gave up 4 sacks to Iowa. That was a season worst. They had touchdown drives of 5 yards and 6 yards, combined for 11 yards for their 2 touchdowns. Their average yards gained per drive was only 13. So they did not really move the football all that well, and they went backwards on 2 of those drives. And one of those drives included a drive where they got the ball at the Iowa 18 off of a fumble and went backwards and had to kick a field goal. So if I'm also looking at the head-to-head battle between Sharon Moore and Phil Parker, and I think both of them are wonderful coaches. It's not me trying to say Sharon can't coach. He won that one.
Yeah. So I saw some of the comments talking about, well, Michigan shut him out, so shouldn't it have went to Jesse Minter? Guys, the context of this is the whole reason why Phil Parker won. When your offense can't move the football, your defense's back is against the wall all season. So I get it. First off, there is a case for Sharon Moore, but to call this anti-Michigan bias is absolutely ludicrous. Phil Parker's defense had zero room for error all season, and all they did was get it done. Without him, they're a 6-6 team, if not worse.
And they're doing it with guys that a lot of people in the Big Ten ain't trying to recruit either.
Exactly. Not 4 stars or 5 stars. So there may be some Iowa guys on our all red corner, blue corner team draft.
Yes.
We previewed it throughout the week. There will be more around the corner. So find out whose name will be called next, right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. Stick around.
We're back right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. You see the all Red Corner, Blue Corner draft coming together here. This is a recap of the round 6 through 10. You see what Blue Corner is doing over there, getting cooked by the Red Corner.
Oh.
Very obviously. I think both of the teams actually are pretty well-rounded here, but some critical picks coming up. So
yes.
Get through 11 through, 15 of this draft, and you're up first.
I'll kick it off. So you went safety last round. And here's the thing. I'm licking my chops because I think my next pick is a better safety than your last 2 picks anyways. I got Rod Moore, the safety from the University of Michigan. Don't look at those numbers at face value because numbers lie in college.
29
he
tackles.
happens to always be in the right place at the right time
tackles.
and always makes the big plays when you need it most. I'm taking Rod Moore all day long over you guys.
I like productive guys, so you can go ahead and have him, although I do think he is a very good ball player.
Okay,
I'm just trying to talk smack to you right now. All right, so I went wide receiver here. I took Marvin Harrison Jr. Early on the draft, and I'm going over to Illinois, and I'm getting Isaiah Williams. Now, he is a playmaker that I don't think enough people are familiar with, and he's a guy who can stretch the football field on the deep route. He is a guy who you can throw into short spaces with. He is a guy who has the make-you-miss ability to spring the big play, and I like having that type of juice out there on the edges for my offense.
Okay. Who'd you go next?
And then I've got Tommy Eichenberg, linebacker out of the Ohio State University. He was a linebacker of the year in the Big Ten. This guy is just as steady as they come. He's very productive. He's a very smart player. He does the dirty work. And I'm trying to protect him a little bit when we get into coverage, but we'll figure that out on the football field. He does everything else well.
Yeah, I like him. Hey, listen, I don't think he had the best year this year, okay? But he's got potential and he's steady. That is valuable to have as your Mike linebacker. All right, so you picked a couple wide receivers. We'll go to my next pick. I obviously needed to start taking some wide receivers. I had Ibuka last round, but I went with Roman Wilson. And to me, he's the guy that can take the top off on the defense. 22, 23 mile an hour GPS guy who's JJ's favorite target down the red zone. A lot of touchdown production. That was easy for me to start filling out the skill positions.
TDs early in the year, but go on.
Hey, you know, TDs, period. Okay, and then I needed some more defensive backs, and I went Mikey Sainristil, a guy who I thought really, he could have been the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, right? Yeah. Needed a leader, emotional leader, can blitz him, can match him up against the best receivers. Maybe one of the more underrated players in the Big Ten Conference this year, always gets it done.
It was hard for me to not take him, but he plays in the slot a lot for Michigan, and they played him at outside corner against Iowa for sure. I wanted dudes with just maybe a little bit more versatility there, but everything he's done, especially his leadership, is super valuable. I love that guy, as a matter of fact. All right, so I went back to defense for my next pick here, and I went with Aaron Casey. Out of Indiana. You see the numbers there. 20 TFLs is what really stands out.
He could have been linebacker of the year.
He could have. And this guy's got the athleticism. He's got the versatility. He has bad intentions when he gets to the football. You see the forced fumbles number. I really love a guy who is disruptive in terms of forcing the football out. And then on the other side, I went with Jack Sawyer on my defensive line. And he's a guy who really started playing much better football toward the end of the year. Great in run defense. He's got one of the best pressure rates in the Big Ten. The sacks don't necessarily show it, but they weren't a big sack defense to begin with. He's just disruptive, but he also knows when to choke it down and just play the way he needs to play.
He's a guy that moved all across their defensive line and kind of finally found his niche this year, and I think that benefited him. That's a good pick. All right, we can roll through quickly for my next 2 picks. I went linebacker, and I stuck with why not go with one of the best defenses in college football? Get another Michigan guy, Junior Colson. You're going to like these next 2 picks because I know as a linebacker you say, I like my guys to eat with their hands.
Yeah.
That's Junior Colson, and that's Nick Jackson. So I feel really good about the center of my defense, my D-line, my linebackers, to match up with your talented offensive line you picked earlier in the draft.
Yeah, dude, you went with 2 of the best defenses in the nation to take linebackers from. So I think those were definitely good picks. My final pick here is going to be Mason Graham, who's playing on the interior up there in Ann Arbor. I thought that his return to the field this year after he missed some time was instrumental to Michigan's success. Again, a guy who knows when to be steady and when to anchor. But he can get after you, man. He creates the TFLs. He can get after you in the pass game, pressure, sacks, all the things playing inside. I think it's just a good group, man.
So I'm basically picking the Michigan All-Star team.
Man,
you're reaching around a little bit right there.
This is a homer team.
Hey, listen, be sure to join us tomorrow because we're going to wind it down, finish up our picks, and wrap up the draft. And you guys will get to see how our teams stack up. We will need your help to decide whose team drafted a little bit better.
Which was mine. I was cooking.
Which was
for
mine
sure
as well.
All right, but we're going to get out of here. You know what's coming up next. It's time for that conference clash. The Big Ten and SEC are going to face off in 6 bowl games this year. Who will win more? We'll debate that on the other side. It's coming up. Welcome back. It's time for a little conference clash over here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. My guy Jake Butt sitting in. I'm Joshua Perry. We got SEC Mike joining us as well as Chris Marler. And we got to talk about some of these bowl games here because Big Ten and SEC set to face off in 6 bowl games this year. I'll read them off to you, and then you guys got to let me know who's going to win more. So you see, we got Ohio State, Mizzou. We got Penn State taking on Ole Miss. We got Auburn versus Maryland, Wisconsin, LSU, Iowa, Tennessee, and Alabama and Michigan in the CFP. Who's winning more bowl games, SEC Mike?
You don't even have to ask me that question. It's the SEC. Come on. I mean, there's maybe one I'm worried about. That's Ole Miss, Penn State. Lane Kiffin, can he win a big game? I never put money on Lane Kiffin. That's one, and maybe LSU, Wisconsin, only because the soon-to-be Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels, I don't even know if he suits up. If he suits up, it's a blowout.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chris, where are you at?
You know, honestly, the one I'm looking forward to most, I think, is that Mizzou-Ohio State game, because I think that would be, even if the SEC doesn't win more than the Big Ten, that's a really good spot for Mizzou right now. Like, with like constantly with a chip on their shoulder, and then Ohio State having seems like half the offense in the portal already. I think that's a really good spot.
Hang on, SEC Mike, it's a guarantee, and why even play the game? That's how big of a difference you think this is between Bama and Michigan? Like, this one's over in your eyes?
I do, but I do think that's the perfect spot for the Wolverines. Hey, just keep being discounted. You cheated your way to get here. We all know that. But, hey, no one's going to give you a prayer against a red-hot Alabama. And that reminds me of, Joshua's team there, Ohio State, when they played Bama in the inaugural playoff. So I think it suits Michigan's narrative that they're just being discounted.
It's wild that the narrative is you're being discounted when you're the #1 team in the country. I think that's got a chance to be a competitive game. And I know what Nick Saban's going to lean into with the narratives for his team. Jim Harbaugh has been a big narrative guy. He turned bet into an acronym, an abbreviation, which is absolutely wild to me. But I think it's one of the biggest games in Jim Harbaugh's professional career to beat Alabama in a semifinal and to punch his ticket to a national championship game is huge there. The Ohio State-Mizzou one is a very interesting one for me for all the reasons you guys said. I just don't know what's actually going to show up for Ohio State, both personnel-wise and mentality-wise, because I think a lot of people were all in on the fact in that locker room that they were one of the best teams in the country, and they took a close loss to Michigan on the road, and it seems like the reaction, I was one of those people from that game, like I don't know how they respond to that.
They have to, and another piece is just Jim Knowles' name has been mentioned to Duke as well, right? So that's the other piece. Boy, do they need that win, though, for a positive momentum. The roster is talented enough to get it done, and we talked about this on our show. But the Buckeyes have won games defensively, so I think their defense can hold up against Mizzou. I think they can keep this one close at least.
Let me ask the SEC guys this question real quick, because me and Jake were having a bit of an argument about this, but how well will Tennessee be able to move the football on Iowa's defense?
Well, I think it really depends on who's the quarterback. Is it going to be Smoking Joe Milton who could throw it 100 yards, or is it going to be the true freshman Nico? I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. But it doesn't matter to me. They're going to win the game as long as they score 7 points, because I don't have faith in Iowa to get more than 6 against the mighty Tennessee defense. But I got a kid, but this is usually the SEC bowl game that we hate the most is watching Iowa, because it's either you're getting an opt-out bowl and you're just whipping the hell out of a Kentucky-type team, or you're getting smoked against a team like a Tennessee and Ole Miss. So it really just depends on who plays for Tennessee, I think.
It's an interesting take. That Iowa defense is something else. But I'll leave it there. It's your guys' turn now.
What do you think, Chris? I know Chris is a big Tennessee homer, too.
Listen, I punished myself after Thanksgiving, and I sat down for 3.5 hours to watch Iowa, and my God, it was tough. It was tough. Yeah, I mean, honestly, they do have a really good defense, but watching that offense is fascinating. It is fascinatingly bad. It's like watching somebody find out they're not right-handed their entire life.
That's it. Hey, I will. That's a great analogy.
That took me out.
I will say, though, what teams have figured out up here in the Big Ten this year is how Iowa wins games, which is by forcing turnovers. Iowa knows who they are. They completely know who they are. The defense and special teams understands they have no room for error and they have to step up. So what teams in the Big Ten did this year was they're fine going 3 and out. They're fine punting the ball. They're fine playing the field position game. The challenge for Tennessee, especially as the quarterback situation is up in air, is are they fine doing that, or do they try to win the game? And maybe you do, but that's also how Iowa wins a game, is quarterback mistakes and team mistakes, given that Iowa a short field position. That's the only way they can win games.
It's a good point, Jake. I feel like too many people on offense get impatient, whether it's a coordinator who wants to hit a big play because he's not having the success and it's too gritty for him, or whether it's a quarterback who wants to be a hero. And anytime you want to get impatient playing against Iowa, they're like, all right, here's our chance to pounce. And not necessarily often that they get the chance, but when they do, they take full advantage of it.
I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts, though, on how bad James Franklin needs this one, because I'm trying to figure out where does he get all these accolades? I think he's a top 10 paid coach, and it seems like same story every year. They're undefeated till they play Michigan, till they play Ohio State, and they just get blown out in both those games. And here we go again, and we change a coordinator. We're going to be great next year, and it's the same story. So how much heat is James Franklin going to catch if he cannot beat Ole Miss in this bowl game?
think people are going to be really disappointed. The idea of him being a top 10 paid coach and he's sitting right there in the top 10 with an opportunity to win each of the New Year's Six bowl games, to me, I think really stands out because he's been very consistent in terms of being third place in the Big Ten East, but also a guy who can go to a New Year's Six bowl game, which I still believe is a big deal, even as much as people want to discount it. So it's going to feel a little bit hollow and it's going to feel empty if they win the game because people are going to be like, well, this is where we've been for the last couple of years, and I understand that. If they lose the game, I think people are going to overreact in a sense. And I think that their path changes a little bit in the Big Ten. You're adding some really good football teams, no doubt. But Caleb Williams isn't going to be there for USC next year, and Bo Nix is not going to be there for Oregon next year. And Michael Penix Jr. is not going to be there for Washington next year. I think they play Ohio State. They don't play Michigan a year from now, or something to that effect. Maybe Michigan, not Ohio State. Whatever it is, they've got a path into the future that if they just correct it and they get right, they can do all the things they've been talking about doing.
You know, I feel like
first off, don't let a Tennessee fan tell you that 10-win seasons are apparently just not a big deal anymore. For one, but also like my question for this game, because it's two very, very contrasting styles, like Penn State's defense and then obviously Ole Miss's offense with Kiffin. But like you have nothing to lose at this point, right? It's a New Year's Six game. Like, will he finally open up the offense to some degree?
He better.
James Franklin, will he finally open up something a little bit because it's a bowl game?
Well, I think they have to, and that's where this benefits because they parted ways with Mike Yurcich in the middle of the season, and the season just rolls too quickly for that to really actually have an effect. But now you have 15 practices where you can come together as a staff and meet as a mind to see, hey, what can we do in this bowl game to set up Drew Aller for success, to set up their young running backs for success. Remember, they played Utah last year, a tough football team in the Rose Bowl. Those running backs looked great. The offense looked solid. I trust the defense. I think schematically they really do present some challenges that are really exotic and unique. But the offense has to show some type of life. Man, it's recruiting. It's a number of different reasons. These bowl games are like a stamp and a seal to the season. They do need it.
I'll say this, too, about the Penn State offense is the happiest Drew Aller looks on the sideline on the football field is when they let him throw it down the field. When he's able to open up his arm, you can visibly see him smiling. When they're asking him to do all the dinking and dunking and handing the football off, I don't think he loves that because he knows what his skill set is, and I don't think James Franklin figured that out until it was too late this year.
Well, Jake and Josh, we're going to transition to some SEC, so just want to thank you guys for being good sports while I run my mouth. I'm sure I will not regret any of these comments here in a couple weeks when the Big Ten dominates the SEC.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Chris, so we got quarterback top here in the SEC, and hey, I've got a little bit of a hot take for you. We all know Jayden Daniels. He's probably going to win the Heisman, best quarterback in the SEC. But the debate, and I think I know where you'll go with this, Jalen Milroe, Carson Beck, those are the guys often discussed as the number 2 quarterback in the SEC. But I'm going out on a limb here, and I know the stats don't necessarily represent this, but I think Spencer Rattler had the second most impressive season of all SEC quarterbacks due to the fact that he had no help around him, no running game, one receiver. He's running for his life the entire season. Am I a complete fool, or do you agree with me there? And I think I already know where you're going.
I just don't know why that would be the. That's like saying Mark Stoops is the second best coach in the SEC because, he doesn't have enough good players to win 10 games, so they only won 8. I mean, I get what you're saying, but also the thing with Spencer Rattler that really, really like disappointed me this year was his numbers on the road versus at home were like night and day. And they played a lot of games on the road early and some tough opponents. And you're not wrong. Like he's running for his life every single down. But looking at those quarterbacks, I honestly, Carson Beck, regardless of what happened in Atlanta, I think is a solidified, probably top 5 quarterback in the country next year. That's the first time I've seen him get rattled. But when he's in command of that offense, it is very, very explosive and very efficient.
Well, speaking of Carson Beck, there's a report out there from Dog Nation that allegedly, again, who knows, but they're saying he's seeking somewhere around $4 million to return to the Georgia Bulldogs. We had Hudson Mason on the show recently saying, he was hearing $1 million, which seems far more realistic. But is any quarterback with championship aspirations, Heisman aspirations, worth $4 million? What's your thoughts on all that?
Florida tried to pay a 17-year-old like $13 million like last year. So, I mean, I think like you heard Matt Rule say this a couple weeks ago, how like the going rate for a quarterback in the transfer portal, especially, is $1 to $2 million, and that's just like that's what college football is now. That's what recruiting in the portal have kind of turned it into, and that's not a bad thing or necessarily a good thing. It's just what it is. I will say $4 million seems steep, and I guarantee you, if he made that pitch to Kirby, especially after that loss, you know that Kirby, for like as soon as he left the room, was like, dude, I could pay Stetson Bennett $20 and still win back-to-back natties with him. Like, am I gonna pay you $4 million?
That's what we pay backups at Tennessee. We pay him half that, or excuse me, twice that to back up Joe Milton. I don't understand that at all. But I kind of agree with you. $4 million seems a bit steep. But hey, if he delivers a national championship, he wins the Heisman, he's worth every penny, don't you think?
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, like again, the timing of it is very, very odd in terms of like the leverage. I mean, and obviously, I think he's coming back. It's one of the reasons why Brock Vandagriff probably left. And he is, I think, projected to be a first-round pick next year, and he's a very, very talented quarterback. But this is just the new age of football too, where it's like it's not just people getting big like paydays as recruits and as players in college. But I love this like new little experiment. It seems like that's happening, especially in the SEC, where guys are staying in for 3 to 4 years. Like, Hendon Hooker's as a 5th or 6th year senior. Stetson Bennett was there for like 11 years. Carson Beck sat there for 4 years and developed, and now all of a sudden he's probably going to be an elite quarterback. I think it's probably for the best that he did that from jump.
Well, you referenced Brock Vandagriff. He was the backup quarterback behind Carson Beck this season. He is officially committed to Kentucky. We got Max Johnson, former Texas A&M, former LSU, former probably somewhere else. Now he's off to North Carolina. But thoughts on Brock Vandagriff? Because I think this is the ultimate swinging of the fences for Kentucky. If he lives up to the hype, they may have just nailed the best quarterback in the portal. If he doesn't, because he's had limited reps, we don't know what we're getting out of him. Yeah. Could be another disappointing season. This is an interesting one to me.
Yeah, this kind of seems like the new trend and direction that Kentucky's just going to go with from now on. And it worked out pretty well with Will Levis. Devin Leary was just a massive, massive disappointment. I don't know what happened from his freshman year at NC State to this year. Because I think we all thought that, especially with Cohen coming back as OC, they were going to be able to put up some numbers. And they had their top 5 pass catchers returning going into the season. If you couldn't be successful with that, I'm hesitant to say that I think Brock is going to be successful in that offense. Doesn't mean he won't. The thing I was surprised about most was as soon as I heard his name, I just kept thinking he'd be at Auburn, because I feel like he would fit that offense well. And the fact that not more quarterbacks, especially in the SEC, are looking at Auburn with what Hugh Freeze has been able to do with quarterbacks in the past, and you look at that recruiting class, they got 2 5-star receivers coming in. I think it's like a really good destination that nobody apparently is looking at.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to throw one at you here, Chris. What about, and he's not officially in the portal yet, but it's anticipated, KJ Jefferson down at Auburn. I think that makes all the sense in the world. I would think Mississippi State would also be involved with KJ Jefferson, but I think Mississippi State, what they ought to do, if they want to show their level of commitment, get that NIL money flowing in, reunite Dillon Gabriel with Jeff Lebby down there in Starkville. That may seem unrealistic, because apparently Oregon's in the mix with Dillon Gabriel, but you have to outbid them. You have to show this is a new era at Mississippi State. What would you think of those fits? Dillon Gabriel, Mississippi State, KJ Jefferson down at Auburn.
I don't know. The price of bags of dairy is pretty high right now, Mike. I'm not sure if they're making a bunch of money down there in Starkville. I get it, but at the same time, I think you're hitching your wagon and putting a pretty big investment for Mississippi State into a 1-year guy. KJ going to South Carolina kind of made sense to me, but I don't know why his options seem to be limited to just the conference. I thought it was a smart move for him to return for another year. Horribly disappointing this year, especially with the new OC with Dan Enos. I don't know why he would want to necessarily stick around the SEC, because he has nothing left to prove in this conference. I mean, at all.
I hear you, but at the same time, I think there's a little bit of redemption, maybe because there are doubters, and we saw glimpses of it when Arkansas went on the road and beat the Florida Gators. I realize not a great win, but for Arkansas, that was probably their best win of the season. I think if you plug them in, maybe even LSU, which I don't think that's very realistic, but throw them at LSU, throw them at Auburn, like you said, a trending Hugh Freeze program with all these recruits. I think he can buy back some of that goodwill and maybe get into NFL draft potential for the following season. That's just a thought. But we got more coming up here, Chris, on Rivals Down South. The transfer portal is the hottest topic right now in college football. We'll discuss the pros and cons here coming right up after the break. Welcome back in to Rivals Down South here. SEC Mike with Chris Marler from Saturday Down South. And hey, we're going to get into some more portal talk in just a second, Chris, but I wanted to ask you here right out the gate, thoughts on Texas A&M. They've officially hired a new offensive coordinator, Colin Klein from Kansas State. That's where he was the last 2 seasons, former quarterback down there. And interestingly, former Heisman finalist the same year Johnny Manziel won it. Thoughts on this hire?
Actually, he was like on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And before they had that collapse late in 2012, they got Bama back in the national championship. But anyway, I digress. I think it's a good hire. Obviously, he's very, very well thought of, and there's only positive things that are said about him. I think in the coaching world, you look at the offense this year for Kansas State; they finished second in the Big 12, so a lot of upside there. And I think you're just looking for something if you're an A&M fan, right? Like it kind of hurt this year that you had your 5-star quarterback go down, especially with how well he was playing. But I think it's probably a good hire. All I want to see from this, it has nothing to do with anything on the field or X's and O's. When he walks in the building, I do not want to see them go arm in arm and sway back and forth like they did with Elko. That was very, very weird and creepy.
Yeah, it's an old adage, but when you hire a defensive coach like a Mike Elko, it's fair to say that his ultimate success or failure may hinge on his coordinator and particularly offensive coordinator hires. So hiring a young guy like this, it's a little bit of a gamble, but like you said, tremendous track record, very well respected. So can't wait to see what he brings to the new era, getting him out of this Jimbo Fisher god-awful offense. But they got another challenge, Chris, and that is the transfer portal. They've been getting hit pretty hard, as you'd expect when you get a coaching change here. Jimbo Fisher, he's actually back in Tallahassee. I don't know if you saw that. He's probably trying to scheme up a way to steal some of these Aggies for the Seminoles. But, I mean, we just lost Max Johnson to North Carolina. His brother Jake Johnson is probably going to follow him. We're losing defensive linemen left and right. Is this cause for concern, or is this just the cost of doing business when you fire a guy like Jimbo Fisher?
Well, I mean, like they weren't winning with those players. It wasn't like, like they weren't winning. I mean, this was the number one recruiting class of all time, and they went 5-7, and then 7-5. So just about as average as you can get. I mean, yeah, it's Walter Nolan was the number one player in the country coming out of high school. So I think some of those guys, like you could say that the class didn't pan out, but the defensive line, like talent they brought in was probably the best in the country as a unit. So that is kind of concerning. And also you think about this, Mike, like in the spring and before the summer started, A&M had lost like upwards of 30 to 40 players in the portal alone from that full year cycle. So it's just more and more attrition. And I don't think in this day and age, this is something like where you come in and the coach is, going to make everyone run to see who wants to stay on this team. This isn't like the Junction Boys. Like you are losing valuable assets.
Right, but to your point, they weren't winning. They're playing a lot of individual football, not a cohesive unit by any means. Guys like Walter Nolan, while he may leave, he's still there. Evan Stewart was a name many people said, he already had one foot out the door. So there are key pieces that remain in College Station. Does that give you hope that maybe we're getting rid of, again, it's kind of hard to find a silver lining in losing so many guys, but if they're not bought in to what Mike Elko is trying to build, could it ultimately be a blessing in disguise, so to speak?
Yeah, and I think also too, like bringing in Elko and majority of that class that was so deep and talented, it was a lot of defensive players. I think if you're Elko, you can look at your resume and your track record, what you've been able to do, and putting kids in the NFL and even at A&M. So he knows the program, he knows the recruiting grounds. I think that if he can get a couple of defensive guys to stay, you don't want to lose Evan Stewart. He's one of the best receivers in the entire country when he's healthy. But I would rather lose him than somebody that I know that I could build something around with that defensive unit with Mike Elko.
Yeah, and if you see, we got fans voting in who needs help the most in the transfer portal, it's teams that struggled, shockingly, Chris. South Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi State. Which one of those rosters do you think could be aided the most via the transfer portal? And I would have to think it's Mississippi State, given that they have a brand new coach. Everyone can start from scratch. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and there's also a little bit of excitement with that. It's just with a new coach, and also it's going to be a very offensive-minded coach. Honestly, I want to say Auburn again, because Auburn, you look at what Hugh Freeze did from day one when he stepped on campus last year in replacing Brian Harsin. He looked at exactly what they needed, a lot of those offensive linemen, and he went to work. And he did, it's on the recruiting trail, the high schoolers and stuff like that as well. But I think that you want to see in year 2 for Auburn, you want to bring in not just names and Power 5 guys, because it was so bad when you got there, you think anything will be better. You want to bring in kids that you can develop and that are going to play well. Because, Peyton Thorne being the big get in the offseason, I don't think that's great. I think Hugh will have something up his sleeve, though. I think they're going to finish strong.
Well, I hope they can get a defender that can guard a 4th and 31 in the backfield. That would be tremendous, Chris, if they could add that. But Rocket Sanders in the portal didn't live up to 2 years ago, Chris. He led the SEC in rushing. Disappointed, got banged up this fall. Not much of an impact for the Arkansas Razorbacks. But I look at a guy like that, if he goes to the right team, can potentially completely change the dynamic of an offense. How big of a target do you think Rocket Sanders will be in the SEC?
So you look at this list, especially South Carolina, Kentucky would benefit from him immediately. And you look at how good or how well Kentucky was able to run the ball this year. I think that's a pretty easy sell to have him come over there. Run behind the big blue wall. I think South Carolina is a school I think that it's exciting because you have a young coach and it seems kind of fun, but a little of that wore off this year because they kind of came back down to the 5-win season, I guess, after ending 2022 with those 2 massive wins. Beamer's got to get an offensive lineman, man. When Rattler transferred from Oklahoma to South Carolina, I remember looking at it, and at OU he had 11 players on that offensive line that were either 4 or 5 stars or better, right? In South Carolina they had 1. I think on the roster now you still only have maybe 3 tops. You could say rankings don't matter, but like in the trenches, it would help. It would help. And you've got to go out and get some talent and keep up.
That's why I said he's number 2. All right, last segment coming up here. We're a couple of trolls. We're going to talk about our favorite troll moments with these coaches. We got one in particular you guys are going to love. Old Billy Napier, Sunbelt Billy. At least he handled this one well. Coming up as we close out on Rivals Down South here on Watch Stadium.
Hey, smile if LSU drop 50 on you.
Look at you.
Chris, I got to be honest. I'm not a big fan of Billy Napier, the coach, but I'm a fan of Billy Napier now that I saw this reaction. How he didn't smack his kid for trolling him and posting it on social media, I'll never know. He's a much better man than I am.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are, Mike. I don't think that's a secret. No, I mean, hilarious troll job from that kid. Also, ballsy move. I don't think I would have done that to an SEC coach when I was that age. But I mean, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what he's supposed to do in that situation. Like, I tell you what, like you said, you would have hit him. Like, that would have been way worse. That would not have been the right decision. I'll say that.
Oh, right. And I would have been fired immediately had I done it. But so again, credit him. Jonathan Smith, not fired, but throwing his gear, his Oregon State gear at the Goodwill. I can't believe that this was found this quickly. Chris, I know you're a big Oregon State homer here. What would you do with this jacket if you had it from Jonathan Smith?
I mean, I've been in the situation, Mike. I've been in the situation before. I had to give away a bunch of Oregon State gear to Goodwill a couple years back after the breakup. But no, I think I was surprised because he that's a guy that, like, he didn't just go to Oregon State. He played there. He coached there. Like, that was his school, and he just bolts the night before the Oregon game. I don't think that half zip's going to be worth a ton of money. Maybe you auction off to one of the Mountain West teams you're going to play next year in your conference.
Right. And hey, speaking of, I don't know if you technically call this a coach blunder or not, Chris, but LSU, after they won the national championship in 2019, I mean, photo after photo after photo of Coach O with these ladies in bed, in the pool, He's living his life. But I do think that was the beginning of the end of the Coach O era down there in Baton Rouge, because you just can't have a coach doing all this, particularly right after a big divorce. You win a title, I get it. You live your life. But, tough look here.